In complex animations, it's really important that we begin to plan our overlapping and follow-through actions. In the animation that we're going to be creating for our homework this week, we are going to be moving this simulated arm from the left side of the screen to the right side. So in every sense, this is its starting pose, and I want to have the shoulder end up over here on the right side, on the right-hand side of all these little dots. Well, in order for us to do this, we need to start planning out the movement arcs of all three of the parts and pieces. If you think about it, this is the shoulder, this big one is the elbow, if you will, and the bottom one, of course, is going to be the wrist. I've made the elbow a little bit bigger just to kind of give us this increased sense of mass and weight. So it's going to be light up here, really heavy in the middle, and then this guy is going to be whisper thin, kind of like a wrist or maybe even the ankles of our feet. If you think of this as a character, this is our head, this is our big body, and then our feet way down here. The same illusion works for both the arm and the character metaphor. Point being that all three of these joints, all three of these sections of this animation are going to be moving independently from each other, applying this idea of that wave that we were talking about before. So let's start planning and plotting and figuring out the movement arcs of this top bit, of the motor itself. When it comes to working with these plannings, or these planning drawings, it's important to apply all that we've learned about the principles of animation. And one of them, of course, is arcs. We want to have our movement go from the left side to the right side. However, we want it to move along a movement arc. We also want to include some anticipation. So ideally, our movement should be along an arc like that, which is pretty cool. Well, what about some anticipation? Anticipation, as we know from our previous module on that principle, creates an opposite direction of the primary line of action. Well, our primary line of action is this way, right? So we want to create an anticipatory movement where it goes this way inside of our scene, this way, right? So we want to go back before we go forwards. Now, how do we connect all of this together? Well, believe it or not, with a figure eight pattern. These figure eight patterns do a great job of infusing a tremendous amount of movement and, most importantly, fluidity into the scene. Now, in the project file that I've given you, I'm on the guide animation layer, which is a good place to begin. I've also gone into my stroke pull-down menu and I've enabled stabilize stroked. That way I can get just a nice kind of fluid figure eight pattern. This is what we're after. Now, this is a super exaggerated figure eight pattern. We're going to make ours a little bit smaller. And I'm going to try this a couple different times. I think I want to anticipate the movement going back this way. And then we're going to have it go forward. Now here's the arc as it goes down. And then I want to do my follow through. So I want to pass the area that I'm going to land on. And I want my animation to land somewhere right around in here. Now if I keep going, you can see that I create this wonderful figure eight. Now this is a good guide layer. And the important thing is to remember is that it's guide. It's just giving us a starting position. If we were to zoom in and look at the little dots that I have here, the end is much higher than the beginning, and that's okay. That could be a fun little follow-through action. We want to produce the illusion that we anticipate its movement, then we move along an arc, and then we overshoot it. That's the follow-through. We overshoot the target, and then we slowly kind of come back. With that guide in mind, let's start establishing the keyframe structure for this follow-through action for our little shoulder. So I'm going to go back into edit mode. And this time, I'm going to go onto the arm layer itself. And I'm going to evenly space out all the keyframes like I had before. So I'm going to go on frame 10 here. And I'm going to animate everything together. So I'm going to do that guy. Here, I know that my dots in the background is on the guide layer. So let's lock that. The arm layer is unlocked. That way I can just work real fast. Boom, there we go. Can hit the rotate tool. Yep, I'm happy with that. The R tool is the rotate tool. You can also grab it from over here. And now let's start figuring out how this is going to work. So I know that I'm going to have an anticipatory keyframe. So let's grab it. And let's say I want my ball to be over here. Now, my eyeball is staying kind of right in the middle of the line that represents the upper arm, this big block here. Okay, there we go. I'm liking that. So we're going to do this in passes. We're going to do the location, and then we're going to do the rotation. If animation is an art form of passes, it helps you and your creative brain kind of understand how all this is plotting out if you do it in passes. Okay. So here's another keyframe for us. This is the anticipatory keyframe, and now it's going to have to go forward. So what's the next important drawing that our audience needs to see in order for them to understand this animation? Well, I think the next important drawing is going to be somewhere right around in here. We can't miss that drawing, and that's kind of how I think about it when I think of these keyframes. Is that what is my audience going to need to see in order to understand the DNA of this movement? All right, now I've just established some keyframes following that figure 8 pattern. And let's just play it. Let's put my sequence end to 50. That way I can cycle through this pretty quickly. Yeah, I'm not thinking about timing now. I'm thinking about movement. Am I getting the movement that I'm after? I'm going to stop my animation. I'm going to turn off the visibility of my guide layer. Sometimes those little dotted lines that we just drew by hand get in the way. And now I'm just looking at the movement itself. Is this giving me the illusion that I'm after? Am I seeing the arcs? Are they coming to the surface? And for me, I think yes. I think I can definitely see the arcs. I'm getting the sense of that organic nature that I was shooting for. So I'm pretty pleased with that. Let's stop the animation and now advance on to the next pass. I'm going to put the guide layers back on just so I have a visual representation of what's up and down. And we're going to revisit every single keyframe. Okay, so we're going to start with the motor. And the motor is these top two. And I'm going to grab the middle arm as well. Okay, now where do we want, how much do we want it to swing backwards? Well, shoot, let's just grab all of them, make it easy for us at the beginning here. How far do I want this to swing backwards? It's going to be a little bit of a two-step process. Ooh, didn't want to extrude it. Hit the E key on accident. How far do I want to rotate this thing? Just grabbing and rotating it. Staying mindful of that guide layer. I love the strokes because I can see a light gray line in here. So it's going to go back and then it's going to go forward. Okay, well, if this is the anticipatory movement, in here, this is looking good, but maybe I rotate it just ever so slightly. Rotate it this way to give it a good line of action, to suggest that this is trailing, the heavy part is trailing in the animation itself. Yeah, I'm liking that. Now let's keep going forward one frame. So this is the follow through. We've overshot the target a little bit, so I'm going to rotate it the other way, grab it, and then finally it rests. It comes to rest. Let's look at the keyframes. We've made a sweeping edit, so let's play it. Yeah, I'm starting to see it now. Let's turn off the visibility of our guide layer. Yeah, we're starting to get that pendulum effect a little bit, which is what we're after. The wave movement is going to come when we start doing all the major keyframing for the entirety of the animation itself, or for the other two parts. I'm very happy with the general keyframing of the motor of this top part. Now let's start figuring out how this is going to move in here, that bottom. Remember, we do it in sections, right? There's section 1, section 2, and then section 3. Without anything at the end of this, section 3 is going to be wicked easy. And really, so we're going to be rotating this big sphere and this small guy a lot. So it's not going to be as noticeable in that third section, but it's important to remember that it's still there. Okay, so with our onion skinning on here, I'm on the first keyframe of my animation. I can see where I'm going. I'm going to go to the second keyframe so I can see in the green where I've begun. Now, if this is moving back, the heavy part is going to stay a little bit more closer to its original starting location. Maybe let's super drive it. I'm going to rotate it even more. Yeah, ooh, that might be good. So it goes like this, and then on this one in here, yeah, I'm going to rotate it again. Oops, I have everything selected on this keyframe. I'm going to right-click and get out of that selection, or that edit, excuse me. Now I can rotate it. Rotate, grab, maybe even more. Should we make it more flexible? That might be kind of fun. Yeah, so it really looks like it's trailing. Okay, so this is the follow-through frame. Okay, now the follow-through frame, it's going to have to play catch up a little bit, right? So maybe on the follow through frame, let's just grab all these bottom parts. We'll rotate them. Maybe on the follow through frame, we have it kick out like this a little bit. Let's super accentuate it. Exaggerate the pose. That might be kind of fun. Oh yeah, like that, like that. And then in here, maybe we even, I think I'm going to need another keyframe, or maybe an in-between will give me the little kick out, a small little kick out over here on the end. All right, let's play it. We've made some pretty big changes. Let's see what our keyframes look like. Yeah, I'm really getting a good sense of that wave and and the impact of the anticipation here at the beginning. I think I need either another keyframe here at the end or perhaps an in-between. Let's make another keyframe. I always think of the keyframes as the DNA of our animation. What does my audience absolutely need to see in order to understand the total fluidity and the total movement that I'm crafting? And without that keyframe, that defines a natural settling. So we go here. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is that I'm going to move the drawing that's on frame 40. I want to bump that forward to frame 45, which will give me another opportunity. Here, let's just duplicate it. Shift D, bring that guy back. Something like that. There we go. Let's zoom in here. Yeah, I think just for illustration purposes, to stay consistent, I'm going to take that last drawing and move it to frame 50. That way I keep with my pattern. I find that working with patterns is really helpful for me because now I have every keyframe spaced evenly 10 frames apart, and I'm pretty pleased with that. Okay, so on this frame, this is where I want it to kind of swing the other direction. This isn't moving so much, but this bottom section really is. So I want to have it go this way, grab it, move it back into position. It's not going to be a huge movement, but let's see what it looks like now. Yeah. Let's go and analyze that last frame ever so slightly. And really look at, I'm looking at the onion skins. Yeah. I think I may need to push the pose a little bit, just to kind of help give me the illusion that I'm after. Yeah, because then it goes from there to there, which is pretty cool. It also creates its natural conclusion point, that third segment. I think I may even do the exact same thing. So if you think about it, this is its own movement, this is its own movement, and the wrist, or that bottom weight, is also its own movement. So they're all three of them have to have their own starts, their own stops, and their own endings, right? So here's on frame 1. Yeah, this is already moving pretty, enough, and this has its own movement. Let's go through. I'm looking at this center one now. Yep. So on frame 40 is when the second one stops its movement, but on frame last is when this third part ends its own movement. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, I may even want to have another one in there. Maybe, yeah, to give it its own moment, because that's this second to last one is the conclusion of this movement. Well, when's the conclusion of that movement? Yeah, let's give it its own moment in the sun. I'm going to duplicate that keyframe. Shift D to duplicate it. We'll go to frame 45. And what I'm going to do here, on this frame here, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to rotate all of this. Oops, looks like I didn't grab that bottom one. I'm going to rotate this just ever so slightly, grab it, and I'm going to very carefully place the top sphere in the exact same location as its friend, because I don't want that top sphere to move. Yeah, that's better, because look, now the top sphere finishes its movement, so it's moving here. Top sphere finishes on 40, middle sphere finishes on 45, last sphere finishes on 50. I like that. Let's play it. Yeah, it's going to work. Without some in-betweens, it gets real choppy in there at the end. But I think once we have it all timed out, with all the in-betweens is going to give us a nice structure. And this is how we want to work. We want to work in a whole series of passes. We establish the movement arc of the motor pretty early on, and then we establish the structure of the animation by working in large chunks. I wasn't trying to figure out where each individual part was going to be on every single keyframe. I said, okay, on the first keyframe, where's everything? On the second keyframe, how am I going to rotate everything to make it work? And then I just started breaking it down into individual parts and pieces, and it works very, very well. It helps you stay organized. It helps you focus your attention on just one object. And then at the end, kind of like what I did, I went, you know what? How can I plus this a little bit more? How can I add a little character movement for the middle so it has its own conclusion that's separate from the character movement of the end of the arm, which gets its own movement here on the last keyframe. This is how we establish our keyframe structures to apply the principle of overlapping action and arcs and help increase our audience's understanding of weight inside of the animations that we're creating.